The stars bent and twisted as 500 massive warships tore through the fabric of space. The Vortan Empire had arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, and their fleet was a sight that had brought terror to 40 star systems before this one. Each ship stretched as long as a city block, covered in dark metal that seemed to drink in the light of distant stars. Their weapons could turn planets into dust. Their shields could stop any known attack. For 200 years, no one had defeated them in battle. Fleet Commander Raoul stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was tall even for a Vortan, with gray skin marked by the scars of 20 campaigns. His 4 eyes scanned the tactical displays with the calm confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, their movements precise and practiced. "Begin scanning the system," Raoul commanded. His voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute authority. "Find me their defense fleet. Find me their weapons. Find me everything." His tactical officer mech worked quickly at his console. Lights flickered across the displays as their scanners reached across millions of kilometers of empty space. Mech had served with Raoul for 15 years and knew his commander's methods. They always studied their prey before the kill. "Commander, I have located the human defense fleet," Mech reported. He paused and his mandibles clicked together in what might have been confusion. "They are holding position near the 4th planet. Mars, the humans call it." "How many ships?" Raoul asked. 200 vessels, Commander. They appear to be arranged in a standard defensive formation around the planet's orbit. Raoul nodded slowly. 200 ships against his 500. The humans would lose, but at least they had the courage to face him. He respected that much. "What class of vessels? What weapons systems?" Mech studied his displays more carefully. Then his mandibles began to click rapidly, the Vortan equivalent of laughter. "Commander, you need to see this yourself." Raoul moved to stand beside his tactical officer. He looked at the scans and felt his own mandibles begin to click. Then the clicking turned into full laughter. Soon others on the bridge were looking at the displays and joining in. The sound of Vortan laughter filled the command center. The human ships were ancient. There was no other word for it. The scanners showed vessels that used fusion drives, technology the Vortans had abandoned 300 years ago. The hull composition read as basic titanium steel alloys, nothing like the advanced crystalline armor that covered Vortan warships. Their weapons were kinetic railguns and chemical rockets. No plasma weapons. No energy shields. No quantum drives. "These are museum pieces," Raoul said, still laughing. "The humans are defending their homeworld with antiques, with relics from their own primitive past." "Perhaps they have nothing better, Commander," Mech suggested. "Perhaps this is truly the best they can field." Raoul walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. He was still amused, but now he felt something else too. Disappointment. He had hoped for a real fight. He had heard rumors about humans, stories that they were dangerous and unpredictable. But looking at these scans, he saw only a weak species trying to look strong. "Open a communication channel," Raoul ordered. "Broadcast on all human frequencies. I want everyone on that planet to hear this." A human face appeared on the main screen. The human was older, with gray hair and a calm expression. He wore a dark blue uniform with marks of rank on the shoulders. The nameplate read, "Admiral Day, Earth Defense Command." "I am Fleet Commander Raoul of the Vortan Empire," Raoul began. He made sure his voice carried the proper amount of contempt. "We have scanned your defensive fleet. We have seen your ancient ships floating around your 4th planet. We have seen your primitive weapons and your outdated drives. Honestly, I am disappointed. I expected more from the species that claims to be so clever and adaptable." Admiral Day simply watched and listened. His face showed no emotion, no fear, no anger, nothing, Raoul continued. "Let me be clear about your situation. My fleet consists of 500 warships, each one more powerful than your entire defensive force. Our weapons can crack planets. Our shields can stop stars. You have 200 ships that belong in a museum. If you face us in battle, we will sweep you aside like dust." Still, the human admiral said nothing. He just watched with those strange, forward-facing eyes. "I am not without mercy," Raoul said, though mercy was not exactly what he felt. "I will give you 48 hours to surrender. If you do, I promise to preserve one of your cities as a cultural exhibit. Your species will be remembered. Future generations will be able to see how you lived before the Vortan Empire brought order to your world." Now Raoul gestured to someone off-screen. A new display appeared, showing recordings from previous conquests. Cities burning, ships exploding, Entire civilizations crumbling before Vorton might. All of them had possessed more advanced technology than Earth. All of them had fallen. These species had quantum drives, Ral said. They had energy shields. They had weapons beyond your understanding. And they all fell before us. What chance do you have with your ancient fleet? With your primitive guns and your slow ships? Finally, Admiral Day spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. Fleet Commander Ral, I appreciate your offer. However, Earth must respectfully decline your terms of surrender. Ral's mandibles stopped clicking. You decline? Did you not see what I just showed you? Did you not understand? I understood perfectly, Day replied. You have more ships. Your technology appears more advanced. Your empire has conquered many worlds. All of this is true. However, you have made one critical error in your calculations. And what error is that? Ral asked. He was no longer amused. You assume that old means weak, Day said simply. You assume that because our ships look ancient, they cannot fight. You assume that because we use kinetic weapons instead of plasma, we cannot hurt you. These are dangerous assumptions, Commander. I would suggest you reconsider your attack. Ral laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Reconsider? Human, I have conquered 40 star systems. I have destroyed fleets 3 times the size of yours. I have burned worlds that possess technology your species can only dream of. And you want me to reconsider because of 200 antique ships? Yes, Day said. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Your courage is admirable, Ral admitted. But courage without strength is just foolishness. I will give you your 48 hours. Use that time to prepare your surrender, or use it to say goodbye to your loved ones. The choice is yours, but the outcome is certain. He cut the communication channel. The human's face disappeared from the screen. Helm, set course for the inner system, Ral commanded. We move on their defensive fleet in 48 hours. Weapons division, prepare firing solutions for all human vessels. I want this to be quick and clean. They chose to fight with their museum pieces. We will show them what real warships can do. The crew acknowledged his orders and went to work. The massive Vortan fleet began moving deeper into the solar system, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They moved with absolute confidence, certain of their victory. Ral remained in his command chair, thinking about the human admiral's words. The old human had shown no fear, even when facing certain destruction. That was interesting. Most species panicked when they saw Vortan might. They begged. They tried to negotiate, but this Admiral Day had simply declined the surrender offer and warned Ral to reconsider. It was almost enough to make Ral wonder if the humans knew something he did not. But that was impossible. The scans were clear. The human fleet was ancient technology. There was no hidden threat, no secret weapon, just old ships crewed by a stubborn species that did not know when to accept defeat. On Earth in the command center deep beneath the surface, Admiral Day watched the Vortan fleet begin its approach. Around him, dozens of officers monitored displays and coordinated with the defensive fleet. Everyone was quiet, focused on their tasks. Captain Bora, Day's second-in-command, approached. She was younger than Day, with sharp features and the alert stance of a career military officer. Admiral, the Vortan fleet is advancing. They will reach Mars orbit in 47 hours at their current speed. Good, Day said calmly. Activate Protocol Grey Wolf. Send the authorization codes to all fleet commanders. It is time to show the Vortans what our ancient ships can really do. Bora nodded and moved to her station. She began entering commands, sending encrypted messages to the 200 warships waiting in orbit around Mars. Each ship received the same short message. Activation authorized. Engage when ready, make them regret their laughter. Around Mars, in the cold darkness of space, the ancient human fleet began to wake up. Fusion cores that had been running on minimal power suddenly surged to full capacity. Weapon systems that had appeared dormant came online. Sensors that had been broadcasting false readings switched to combat mode. And deep in the heart of each ship, systems that the Vortan scanners had never detected began to power up. Captain Tay stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable. His ship was one of the oldest in the fleet, her hull marked by 100 years of service. The Vortans had scanned her and seen an antique. They had missed everything that mattered. All systems are responding, his weapons officer reported. The camouflage networks are still active. The 48 hours passed slowly for both fleets. The Vortan armada moved steadily through the solar system, their massive ships cutting through space with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Fleet Commander Raoul had divided his forces into 3 battle groups. He would lead the center formation directly at the human defensive fleet around Mars. 200 Vorton warships against 200 human antiques. It would barely qualify as target practice. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Raoul's crew worked with relaxed efficiency. Several officers had even started placing bets on which human ship would be destroyed first. The mood was almost festive. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. Distance to human fleet? Raoul asked. 500,000 kilometers in closing, Commander, Mech reported. The human vessels are holding their positions around Mars. No aggressive movements. No attempts to flee. Brave or stupid, Raoul mused. Perhaps both. Do they still broadcast the same readings? Yes, Commander. All scans confirm primitive fusion drives, basic armor, kinetic weapons only. Nothing has changed, Raoul nodded. At least the humans were not trying to run. He respected courage, even foolish courage. When this was over, he would make sure the survivors were treated well. They had earned that much. All ships weapons free when we reach optimal range, Raoul commanded. Target their largest vessels first. I want clean kills. No unnecessary cruelty. The acknowledgements came back from his battle group. 200 Vorton warships armed their plasma torpedoes and energy weapons. Their targeting computers locked onto the human ships ahead. The range counter ticked down steadily. 400,000 kilometers. 300,000. 200,000. Optimal firing range in 30 seconds, Commander, Mech announced. Raoul leaned forward in his command chair. This was the moment he always enjoyed. The moment before the first shot when anything was still possible. Then the weapons would fire and the outcome would become certain. He had seen it happen 40 times before. This would be the 41st. Fire when ready, he said calmly. The Vorton fleet opened fire. Hundreds of plasma torpedoes launched from their tubes. Bright streaks of contained energy racing across the darkness toward the human fleet. These weapons could melt through any armor known to exist. Each one carried enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The humans would never even know what hit them, except something went wrong. The human ships moved. But they did not move like ships using fusion drives. They did not accelerate slowly and turn in wide curves. They moved instantly, impossibly fast, dodging with the agility of fighter craft. What had appeared as slow, outdated fusion drives suddenly revealed themselves as something else entirely. The human vessels twisted through space with movements that should not have been possible for ships of their size. Every single plasma torpedo missed. Raoul stood up from his chair. What just happened? Commander, the human ships accelerated beyond anything our scans indicated, Mech said, his mandibles clicking rapidly in confusion. They should not be able to move like that. Their drives read as primitive fusion technology. But they are moving like they have gravitic engines. Then our scans are wrong, Raoul snapped. Rescan them. Get me accurate readings. But before Mech could comply, the human fleet returned fire. The battleship Indomitable's missile tubes opened. What emerged looked like conventional warheads, the kind that would barely scratch Vorton's shields. Captain Tay watched from his bridge as 30 missiles launched, their rockets burning bright. Stealth coding is holding, his weapons officer reported. Vorton sensors still reading them as conventional explosives. Good, Tay said. Impact in 20 seconds. The missiles accelerated far beyond what chemical rockets should allow. Hidden gravitic drives pushed them to speeds that made them nearly impossible to intercept. And inside each warhead, where the Vortons expected conventional explosives, was something very different. Compressed antimatter charges, enough to crack a ship in half. 3 Vorton destroyers never saw it coming. The missiles slipped through their point defense systems and struck home. The antimatter charges detonated. 3 ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in flashes of pure energy that lit up the darkness like newborn stars. Direct hits, Tay's weapons officer confirmed. 3 kills confirmed. Tay allowed himself a small smile. Reload all tubes. Target the next group. Let us see if they are still laughing at our ancient ships. On the Eternal Conquest, Raoul stared at his displays in shock. 3 ships gone. 3 ships destroyed in the opening seconds of the battle by weapons that were supposed to be primitive. This was not how it was supposed to happen. The Vortons were the advanced species. The humans were the primitives. Full scan now, Raoul shouted. I want to know what we are really facing. "Scanning, Commander," Mech replied. His manipulators worked frantically across his console. "Commander, the ships are still reading as primitive technology, but they must be using some kind of false signal generators. Everything we are seeing must be fake. Those are not fusion drives. That is not simple armor. The humans have been lying to us from the start." The realization hit Ral like a physical blow. They had walked into a trap. The ancient fleet was not ancient at all. It was camouflaged, hidden. The humans had deliberately made their ships look weak to draw in their enemies, and he had fallen for it completely. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Ral commanded. "Treat the human fleet as equal threat level. Maximum combat protocols, but the damage was already done. The human fleet had planned for this moment. They knew the Vortons would underestimate them. They knew exactly how to exploit that mistake." Commander Juan's carrier Defiance launched its fighter wings. 200 small craft erupted from the launch bays, their engines burning as they accelerated into the battle. The Vortons saw them coming and prepared their point defense systems. But these were not the primitive fighters their scanners had detected. These were something far more dangerous. The human fighters moved like they were alive. They used Mars's gravity well to slingshot around the planet, building impossible speed. They twisted and turned through space in patterns that no Vortan computer could predict. The AI systems controlling Vortan point defense tried to track them and failed. The fighters were simply too unpredictable, too fast, too creative in their movements. They slipped through the defensive fire and began attacking Vortan ships from behind. Their weapons were small, not designed to destroy capital ships. But they did not need to destroy them. They just needed to cripple them. The fighters targeted engines and sensor arrays. They struck and faded, never staying in one place long enough to be hit. 12 Vortan ships lost their main engines. 8 more lost their primary sensors. The massive warships began to drift, unable to maneuver properly. They became obstacles for their own fleet, forcing other ships to adjust their positions to avoid collisions. "They are targeting our engines," Mech reported. "They are trying to disable the fleet, not destroy it." "Why would they do that?" Ral demanded. Then understanding came. "They are trying to force us into predictable positions. They want us bunched together." But even as he realized the trap, it was too late to fully avoid it. 50 Vortan ships concentrated their fire on the carrier Defiance, trying to eliminate the source of the troublesome fighters. Plasma beams lanced across space, enough concentrated energy to melt a moon. The carrier should have died. The energy weapon struck its hull and started burning through. But the ancient armor held. What the Vortans thought was simple titanium steel revealed itself as adaptive nano-armor. The material absorbed the energy and dispersed it across the entire hull. The carrier's surface glowed white-hot, but it did not melt. It did not break. "Damage report," Juan called out calmly. "Hull integrity at 70%, his damage control officer replied. "Nano-armor is functioning as designed. We can take another volley like that." "Good. Continue fighter operations. Launch second wave." Another 100 fighters erupted from the carrier. The Vortans had thrown everything at Defiance and failed to destroy it. Now they had to face even more fighters while their own formation was in chaos. The cruiser Relentless moved into optimal firing position. Engineer Nari had spent years preparing the ship's railgun systems. The Vortans had scanned them and seen primitive kinetic weapons. They had not realized how primitive could become deadly with enough power behind it. "Railguns charged," the weapons officer reported. "Fire," Nari commanded. The tungsten slugs launched at 30% of light speed. At that velocity, they carried more kinetic energy than any plasma weapon. The Vortan shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They were basically useless against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The slugs punched through the shields like they were not there. They tore through the advanced crystalline armor of Vortan ships like it was paper. Each impact released enough energy to shatter a ship's spine. 4 Vortan cruisers simply broke in half, torn apart by weapons the Vortans had dismissed as obsolete. The battle was not going as planned. Ral watched his tactical display as his carefully organized formation fell apart. Ships were dying. Others were crippled and drifting. His pilots were struggling against human fighters that moved like nothing they had ever faced. His weapons were not as effective as they should be. Emperor Gresh of the Vortan Empire sat in his throne room, watching the recording of the Mars battle for the 3rd time. His advisors stood in silence around him, None of them wanted to speak first. The footage showed everything. The plasma torpedoes missing, the antimatter explosions, the unstoppable human fighters. The retreat. The footage ended. Gresh remained still for a long moment. Fleet Commander Ral warned us, Gresh finally said. He told us the humans were more dangerous than they appeared. We dismissed his concerns. We thought he had simply made tactical errors. Now we see the truth. His war minister, an old veteran named Kresh, stepped forward. My Emperor, the humans deceived us with false sensor readings. This is not an honorable way to fight. We should protest to the Galactic Council. Gresh turned his four eyes toward Kresh. The Galactic Council that we have ignored for 200 years? The one that has condemned our conquests 40 times? That Galactic Council? Kresh said nothing. The humans used strategy, Gresh continued. They understood their weakness and compensated for it with deception. This is not dishonorable. This is warfare, and we failed to see through it because we were arrogant. He stood from his throne. How long until Fleet Commander Vesh arrives? 3 days, my Emperor. He brings 300 fresh warships. Good. Vesh has conquered more systems than any other commander in our history. If anyone can defeat the humans, it will be him. 3 days later, Fleet Commander Vesh's armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Vesh was older than Ral, his gray skin marked with the ritual scars of 50 successful campaigns. He had watched the recordings of the Mars battle more than 20 times. He had studied every human movement, every tactic, every weapon. He would not make Ral's mistakes. All ships assume defensive sphere formation, Vesh commanded. Maximum scanning protocols on all frequencies. Trust nothing your sensors tell you about the human fleet. Assume every reading is false until proven otherwise. His tactical officer, a young female named Tala, worked at her station. Commander, we have located the human defensive fleet. They are retreating from Mars toward Earth. Current position is near the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Retreating? Vesh asked. Or leading us somewhere? Unknown, Commander. Vesh studied the tactical display. The asteroid belt was a natural defensive position. Millions of rocks floating in space providing cover and obstacles. If the humans wanted to slow down a pursuing fleet, the belt would be the perfect place to do it. Advance at half speed, Vesh ordered. Battle scanners on maximum. Scan every asteroid. Scan every piece of debris. The humans like to hide things. I want to know what is hidden before we encounter it. The Vortan fleet moved forward carefully. This was not the confident advance of Ral's attack. This was the cautious approach of a commander who had learned to respect his enemy. The formation stayed tight, each ship covering the others. Point defense systems were active and tracking everything in range. It took them 6 hours to reach the asteroid belt. The human fleet was there, positioned among the larger asteroids, but they were not preparing for battle. They were just waiting. Commander, I am detecting multiple human installations throughout the belt, Tala reported. They appear to be mining stations. Civilian operations. Appear to be, Vesh repeated. Scan them anyway. Full analysis. The scans came back showing exactly what they should. Mining equipment, ore processing facilities, life support systems for workers. Everything looked normal, but Vesh had not survived 50 campaigns by trusting appearances. How long have those stations been there? He asked. Tala checked her data. According to our intelligence, humans have been mining the asteroid belt for over a century. These stations have been in operation for decades. A century of preparation, Vesh said quietly. A century to turn civilian stations into military assets. A century to hide weapons in plain sight. He made his decision. All ships weapons-free. Target any installation that shows power readings above baseline. If it has more power than it needs for mining, destroy it. The Vortan fleet opened fire. Plasma torpedoes and energy beams lanced across the belt, striking mining stations. Some of them exploded like normal civilian structures, but others did not. 3 stations that were hit did not explode. Instead, they activated. Massive hatches opened on their surfaces. And what emerged were not mining tools. They were mass drivers. Huge magnetic accelerators designed to launch ore containers across the solar system. Except they were not launching ore. Station Chief Kyung watched from her command center deep inside the largest station. She had worked here for 15 years, maintaining the secret weapon network while pretending to be a simple mining administrator. Now it was time to show the Vortans what those mining stations could really do. All stations activate firing protocols, Kyung commanded. Target the Vortan capital ships. Maximum rate of fire. Thousands of tungsten projectiles launched from the mass drivers. These were not sophisticated weapons. They were just lumps of dense metal accelerated to high speed. But there were thousands of them, and they came from every direction at once. The Vorton defensive sphere suddenly had threats approaching from above, below, and all sides. The Vorton point defense systems tried to track and destroy the incoming projectiles. They managed to stop most of them, but not all. Tungsten slugs slammed into Vorton ships at tremendous velocity. Shields meant for energy weapons did little against solid matter. Armor cracked. Hull plates buckled. One destroyer took a direct hit to its main reactor and exploded. Evasive maneuvers, Vesh commanded. Get us away from those stations. But as his fleet tried to move, the human warships attacked. They had been waiting among the asteroids, their positions carefully chosen. Now they emerged with perfect timing, catching the Vorton fleet while it was dodging the mass driver fire. Captain Tay led his battleship group in from above. Commander Juan's fighters swept in from the sides, and from behind a dozen human cruisers blocked the retreat path. The Vorton defensive sphere had become a trap. They could not maneuver without hitting asteroids. They could not advance without facing the main human fleet. They could not retreat without exposing their engines. And all around them the mining stations kept firing. This is the human strategy, Vesh said almost admiringly. They used civilian infrastructure as part of their military network. They spent a century preparing this battlefield, and we walked right into it. Orders, Commander? Tala asked urgently. Vesh studied his options. They were all bad, but staying in the belt was certain death. Concentrate fire on the path ahead. We punch through the human main fleet. Maximum speed. Tell all ships to ignore the mining stations. They are secondary threats. The Vorton fleet charged forward. 300 warships against 200 human vessels. Even in this situation, the Vortons had more firepower. If they could break through, they could escape the trap. But the humans had one more surprise waiting. Engineer Nari had spent 3 years developing the EMP mines. They looked exactly like asteroids. They drifted through space on the same trajectories as natural rocks. They gave off the same thermal signature. They were completely invisible until they activated. 30 mines drifted into the Vorton formation. Then they detonated simultaneously. Powerful electromagnetic pulses washed over the Vorton ships. Systems failed. Computers crashed. Power grids went offline. In an instant, 50 Vorton warships went dead in space, their crews scrambling to restart critical systems. The human ships were affected too, but less severely. Human engineers had hardened their systems against electromagnetic attack. They had learned from old Earth wars that sometimes the simplest weapons were the most effective. Their ships lost secondary systems but kept their main drives and weapons operational, and that was all they needed. The carrier Defiance launched every fighter it had. 200 small craft swarmed the disabled Vorton ships. Without power, the Vorton vessels could not defend themselves. The fighters targeted specific points on each ship: engines, weapon arrays, command centers. They did not destroy the ships. They made sure they could never fight again. Vesh watched helplessly as his fleet was systematically crippled. The humans were not interested in killing them. They were removing threats. Every ship they disabled was one less enemy they had to face later. Restore power to all systems, Vesh ordered. I do not care how. Just do it. His engineers worked frantically. It took 10 minutes to bring systems back online. 10 minutes of being sitting targets while human weapons tore his fleet apart. When power finally returned, Vesh took stock of the situation. It was devastating. 70 ships destroyed. Another 80 damaged so badly they could barely move. His fleet had been reduced by half, and they had not even reached the human main defensive line yet. Commander, the human admiral is sending a message, Tala reported. Admiral Day's face appeared on the screen. He looked exactly as calm as he had during the first communication with Ral. Like this was all proceeding according to plan. Fleet Commander Vesh, Day said, you can continue this attack if you wish. But you see what will happen. We have prepared this battlefield for a century. Every asteroid could be a weapon. Every station could be a trap. You will lose more ships with every kilometer you advance, or you can withdraw and reconsider your approach. The human fleet left Earth's solar system 3 days after the asteroid belt battle. 150 ships, the fastest vessels in the ancient fleet. They left 50 ships behind to defend Earth. though Admiral Day knew those would not be enough if the Vortans attacked in force. But he was gambling that the Vortans would take time to rebuild and plan. He was gambling that humanity's best defense was a strong offense. Captain Tay stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, as the stars stretched and twisted around them. The Vortan hyperspace coordinates they had captured were proving accurate. The journey would take 2 weeks. 2 weeks of traveling through uncharted space, heading toward the heart of an empire that had conquered 40 civilizations. All systems nominal, his navigation officer reported. We should arrive at Vortan space on schedule. Tay nodded. 2 weeks, not enough time to fully prepare for what they would face, but enough time to make sure every system was perfect. Enough time to run simulations. Enough time to make peace with the possibility that they might not return. He walked through his ship during the journey, talking with his crew. Many of them were young, born after the ancient fleet had been relegated to reserve status. They had grown up hearing that these ships were obsolete. They had trained on them, knowing that if war came, they would be flying museum pieces against modern technology. And then they had discovered the truth. These ancient ships were the deadliest weapons humanity possessed. "Captain, do you think we can really win?" a young weapons officer asked him during one of these walks. "I think we have already won 2 battles that everyone said we would lose," Tay replied. "The Vortans thought we were weak. They learned otherwise. Now we will teach them that humans do not wait for the enemy to attack. We go to them." On the carrier Defiance, Commander Juan was training his pilots around the clock. They ran simulation after simulation, practicing strike runs on orbital stations and shipyards. The pilots were tired, but they did not complain. They knew what was coming. When they arrived at Vortan Prime, they would have one chance. One opportunity to strike before the entire Vortan military came down on them. That strike had to be perfect. "Remember," Juan told his squadrons during one briefing, "speed is survival. You get in, you hit your target, you get out. Do not try to be heroes. Do not try to destroy everything you see. We have specific targets and we need to eliminate them quickly." His best pilot, a young woman named Jisoo, raised her hand. "Commander, what if they have defenses we do not expect?" "Then you adapt," Juan said simply. "That is what we do. The Vortans have energy shields and plasma weapons. We have creativity and the willingness to do whatever it takes. Never forget which one is more powerful." Throughout the fleet, Engineer Nari led teams checking and rechecking every system. The journey through hyperspace put stress on the ships. Old hulls groaned. Ancient systems worked hard to maintain power. But the upgrades held. The new technology hidden inside these century-old frames performed exactly as designed. Nari spent hours in the engineering sections, talking with her teams. "These ships were built by people who knew they might have to last 100 years, she told them. "They built them strong. They built them tough. Everything we have added has made them stronger. Trust these ships. They will not fail us." Intelligence Officer Sung studied everything they knew about Vortan Prime. The planet was heavily populated, billions of Vortans living in vast cities. The orbital space was crowded with stations and shipyards. Most importantly, there was the Grand Armada under construction. 2,000 warships being built to crush Earth once and for all. That armada was the primary target. Sung presented his findings to Admiral Day during a command meeting. "The Vortans have 50 combat-ready ships defending their homeworld," Sung explained. "The rest of their fleet is spread across their empire. They never expected anyone to attack their home. Their defenses are designed to look impressive, not to actually fight. 50 ships against our 150. Day mused. "Better odds than we have faced before. But those orbital stations will have weapons too." "Yes, Admiral. But our analysis shows they are designed for show, meant to intimidate visitors and demonstrate power. They have never fired in anger. We believe they will be vulnerable to focused assault." Day nodded slowly. "Then we split into 3 groups. Captain Tay's battleships will engage the defense platforms. Commander Juan's fighters will strike the shipyards and the Grand Armada under construction. My command squadron will hit the military headquarters station. We destroy their ability to build ships and coordinate their forces. Then we leave before reinforcements arrive." The plan was simple. Simple plans were usually the best. But everyone knew that no plan survived contact with the enemy. They would have to adapt and improvise when the situation changed. On the 14th day, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vortan Prime system. The sight that greeted them was staggering. Hundreds of orbital stations surrounded the planet. Massive construction yards floated in high orbit, each one large enough to build a dozen ships simultaneously. And there under construction was the Grand Armada, skeletal ships being assembled, waiting for the day they would burn Earth to ashes. "We are detecting minimal combat activity," the sensor officer reported. "Most of their defense fleet appears to be on patrol routes around the outer system. We caught them off guard." "Then we do not give them time to react," Day said. "All ships execute attack plan. Move fast, hit hard, show them what humans can do." The fleet split into 3 groups and accelerated toward their targets. The Vortons detected them immediately. Alarms sounded across every station. Defense platforms powered up weapons. The 50 warships on station scrambled to intercept, but they were too slow. The humans had planned this perfectly. Captain Tay's battleship group struck the defense platforms first. These massive stations had been built to intimidate, covered in weapons that looked fearsome. But they had been designed by engineers who never expected to use them. The platforms were actually quite fragile. Their weapons powerful, but their targeting systems slow. The Indomitable and her sister ships moved between the platforms, using the stations themselves as cover. The Vorton platforms tried to fire but kept hitting each other in the crossfire. Human railguns fired with precision, targeting reactor cores and power junctions. One by one, the platforms went dark or exploded. Tay's group was outnumbered, but they were faster and smarter. "Focus on the platforms closest to the shipyards," Tay commanded. "Clear a path for the fighters." His ships did exactly that. Within 15 minutes, they had neutralized the defensive ring around the construction yards. The path was open. Commander Juan launched his strike. 200 fighters and bombers poured from the Defiance and other carriers. They swept toward the shipyards in tight formation, then split into dozens of small groups. Each group had specific targets. Each knew exactly what to hit. The Grand Armada under construction was defenseless. The ships were not yet complete. Their shields were not installed. Their weapons were not active. They were just empty hulls waiting to be finished. The human bombers flew through the construction yards and unleashed their payloads. Antimatter charges detonated inside the unfinished ships. Fusion missiles tore through support structures. In minutes, 200 years of Vorton shipbuilding was burning. The Grand Armada, the fleet that was supposed to destroy Earth, was being destroyed before it could even launch. Station Commander Zalk watched in horror from the military headquarters station. He had commanded Vorton Prime's defenses for 20 years. In that time, he had never fired a shot. The defenses were symbolic. The Vorton Empire conquered other worlds. No one attacked Vorton space until now. "Get our defense fleet back here." Zog screamed at his communication officers. "I do not care where they are patrolling. Recall them immediately." "They are 2 hours away at maximum speed, Commander," the officer replied. 2 hours might as well be forever. Zog could see the human fighters destroying the shipyards. He could see the defense platforms going dark. And now he saw something that made his blood run cold. A squadron of human warships was heading directly toward his station. Heading toward him, Admiral Day led the assault on the headquarters station personally. He had 50 ships with him, more than enough for this target. The station was huge, designed to look impressive and coordinate Vorton military operations across dozens of systems. But it was not designed for combat. "Target all communication arrays," Day ordered. "I want this station unable to send or receive messages. Cut them off from the rest of the Empire." Human ships surrounded the station and methodically destroyed every antenna, every relay, every transmitter. The Vortons inside tried to defend themselves, but their weapons were not positioned correctly. They had been placed for show, not for actual combat. The station had blind spots everywhere, and the humans exploited each one. Inside the station, Zalk realized he had lost. The shipyards were gone. The defense platforms were destroyed. His station was being dismantled piece by piece, and the human fleet had barely taken any damage. They were too fast, too precise, too prepared. He opened a communication channel to the human commander. A human face appeared, older but with alert eyes. "Admiral Day, you have won," Zalk said simply. The peace negotiations took place on a neutral space station at the edge of Vorton territory. The station had been built centuries ago for diplomatic meetings, back when the Vorton Empire still engaged in actual diplomacy rather than conquest. Now it served that purpose again, though under very different circumstances. Admiral Day led the human delegation. With him came President Yuna, Ambassador Hana, who had decades of experience in interstellar relations, and Captain Tay representing the military forces. They arrived aboard the Indomitable, the ancient battleship that had fought in all three major battles of the war. It was fitting that this ship, which the Vortans had first laughed at, would carry humanity's representatives to the peace talks. Emperor Gresh attended personally, something he had not done for any diplomatic meeting in 20 years. With him came his war council, though several members had been replaced after their failures during the war. Station Commander Zalk was there too, the officer who had watched helplessly as humans destroyed Vortan Prime's defenses. The two groups met in a large chamber with windows showing the stars beyond. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, human and Vortan, two species that had been at war and were now trying to find peace. Gresh spoke first. Ambassador Hana, President Yuna, Admiral Day, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I will not waste time with false pleasantries. The Vortan Empire underestimated humanity. We assumed you were weak because your technology appeared primitive. We assumed conquest would be simple. We were wrong about everything. You were not entirely wrong, Day said calmly. Our ships are ancient. By any standard measure, your technology is more advanced than ours. Where you made your mistake was assuming that technology alone determines victory. Please explain, Gresh said. We have studied the battles. We have analyzed your tactics, but we still do not fully understand how you defeated us. Ambassador Hana stepped forward. She had prepared for this moment. May I present a demonstration? It will help explain our philosophy. Gresh gestured his approval. Hana activated a holographic display. It showed two warships, one human and one Vortan, side by side. This is the battleship Indomitable, Hana said, indicating the human vessel. She was launched 107 years ago. Her hull is titanium steel alloy. Her original design used fusion drives and kinetic weapons. By all appearances, she is a ship from humanity's early space age. The Vortan Council members nodded. They had seen these specifications before. This is the Vortan destroyer Vengeance, Hana continued, indicating the other ship. She was launched 5 years ago. Crystalline armor, quantum drives, plasma weapons. By every measure, she is superior to the Indomitable. And yet the Indomitable destroyed 3 ships like the Vengeance. In the first battle, Gresh said. Because we did something that Vortan culture apparently does not do, Hana replied. We upgraded. Constantly, relentlessly. Every single year for the past century, we have improved the Indomitable and her sister ships. We replaced the fusion drives with gravitic engines but kept the external housings. We reinforced the armor with nanomaterials but maintained the original hull appearance. We upgraded the targeting systems, the power generation, the weapon systems, everything. She changed the display to show the Indomitable's interior systems. The Vortan Council members leaned forward, studying the specifications with shock. The ship they were looking at was not primitive at all. It was cutting-edge technology hidden inside an old frame. Why? Gresh asked. Why hide your advancements? Why not build new ships with new hulls? Because building new ships would have shown our enemies what we were capable of, Admiral Day explained. We learned early in our history that the best defense is to be underestimated. Let the enemy think you are weak. Let them commit to an attack based on false assumptions. Then reveal your true strength when it is too late for them to adapt. Engineer Nari, who had accompanied the delegation, added more. It is also more efficient. These hulls were built to last. The engineers who designed them knew that space travel was expensive and difficult. They built ships that could be repaired, upgraded, and modified. We simply honored their vision and kept improving what they created. But your technology is still behind ours in many ways, Zalk pointed out. Your ships are slower in normal space. Your weapons have shorter range. How did you compensate? Tactics, and Captain Tay said simply. We studied every battle the Vortan Empire has ever fought. We saw your patterns. You rely on overwhelming firepower and superior technology. You expect enemies to face you directly, and when they do, you destroy them. So we did not face you directly. We used terrain. We used deception. We used surprise. We fought the way humans have always fought when facing superior enemies. Intelligence Officer Sung, who had also joined the delegation, brought up historical records. In humanity's history, we have countless examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones. Clever tactics defeating better weapons. Determination overcoming technological advantage. We applied those lessons to space combat. Gresh listened to all of this, and slowly he began to understand. The Vortan Empire had become arrogant. They had won so many battles that they stopped innovating. They built impressive ships meant to intimidate, but they did not build practical ships meant to win fights against creative enemies. They had forgotten that war was not just about having better weapons. It was about using whatever weapons you had in the smartest way possible. "What are your terms for peace?" Gresh asked. President Yuna spoke for the first time. "Earth's sovereignty must be recognized and guaranteed. The Vortan Empire will never again attempt to conquer, invade, or threaten human territory." "Agreed," Gresh said immediately. "We want a neutral zone established between human and Vortan space. Either side will enter without permission from the other." "Agreed. We want technology exchange programs, not military technology but civilian applications, medical science, environmental systems, agricultural techniques. We believe both our peoples can benefit from cooperation." Gresh paused at that. It was unusual. Most species demanded weapons restrictions or tribute. The humans wanted to share knowledge.
"Why would you want this?"
"Because we do not want another war," Yuna said simply. "The best way to prevent future conflict is to make our peoples dependent on each other. If Vortan hospitals use human medical techniques, you will be less likely to attack us. If human farms use Vortan agricultural methods, we will be less likely to attack you. Peace through mutual benefit." "Your species thinks very differently from ours," Gresh observed. "Yes," Yuna agreed. "And that is exactly why we can benefit from working together." The negotiations continued for 3 days. More terms were discussed and agreed upon. The Vortan Empire would grant independence to all territories conquered in the last 50 years. Those civilizations would have the choice to join a new coalition or remain independent. Reparations would be paid to species that had been harmed by Vortan conquest. And most importantly, both sides would establish embassies and begin the slow work of building trust. On the final day, Gresh asked to speak with Admiral Day privately. They met in a small observation room, just the two of them looking out at the stars. "I need to understand something," Gresh said. "When you attacked Vortan Prime, you could have destroyed our planet. Your ships had the firepower. You could have bombarded our cities from orbit. Why did you not?" Day was quiet for a moment. "Because that is not who we are. We fight when we must. We defend ourselves with everything we have. But we do not destroy civilizations just because we can. We targeted your military capacity, not your people. There is a difference. Many species would have taken revenge. We came to conquer your world. We killed thousands of humans. You had every right to retaliate against our civilians. Revenge is not justice," Day said. "And killing civilians is not warfare, it is murder. We wanted to stop you from attacking us, not commit genocide. There is a difference between defending yourself and becoming the monster you are fighting against." Gresh looked at the human admiral with something approaching respect. "Your species is strange. Strong enough to hurt us badly, but restrained enough not to destroy us. Clever enough to defeat us, but wise enough to make peace. I think the Vortan Empire has much to learn from humanity. And we have much to learn from you," Day replied. "You built an empire that lasted 200 years. You developed technology that we are still trying to understand. Neither of our species is perfect, but together we might both become better." 6 months after the peace treaty was signed, the changes were visible throughout both territories. Vortan hospitals implemented human medical scanners that could detect diseases years earlier than before. Human farms used Vortan genetic optimization to grow crops in environments that had been considered unusable. Students from both species began exchange programs, learning about each other's cultures. The freed territories that had been under Vortan control established their own governments. Some joined the new Coalition of Free Worlds, an organization created to help smaller civilizations defend themselves against larger threats. Others chose to remain independent but maintained friendly relations with both humans and Vortans. The ancient human fleet was finally retired. After more than a century of service and 3 decisive battles,